You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Okay, we're going to get started. Town of Branford Board of Finance regular meeting for November 27th, 2023. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the October 30th meeting. I don't think we received the minutes.
I didn't get it.
We got an email on Joe.
6:30 the email.
Oh.
I didn't read
We'll
it.
table tonight.
So maybe I'll entertain a motion to table them till
I make it.
Made a motion by Jeff, seconded by Victor. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second on the agenda is citizens' communication, and at this point in time, we allocate a few minutes for citizens who wish to comment on the agenda. And with no takers, we'll go on to item number 3, is to hear a presentation by the Finance Director on pensions and OPEB asset allocation and return on investment approaches. Jim?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. I probably don't deserve the top billing on this item because this process involved our pension advisors, who I'd like to call up at the present time, and also involved the work of our actuary. And essentially, the approach we took, as you may recall from the last meeting, is that we were looking at the dramatic rise in interest rates, and if that presented any opportunities for us to change the way that we look at managing the pension assets. And so what we represented at the last meeting is we would do an updated asset allocation study, which was sent to you electronically, and which you have hard copies tonight. The goal was, can we immunize additional payments? And when I say immunize additional payments, essentially what we're talking about is buying a fixed income securities to meet projected cash flows. So both the OPEB trust and the pension trust have projected cash flows to the extent we can meet those. Now that sounds really fancy, and in my mind I'd like to simplify it in a way. If one was to retire and they said, okay, I want to have 5 years worth of projected expenses, and they could basically invest that in a secure vehicle like a government bond, well, that certainly makes them sleep at night, and is arguably a better position to be in than relying on the market that is going up and down. Difference is a pension fund and an OPEB trust have an infinite life and an individual does not, but that's basically the same concept. And then the question is, well, if we're going to change that asset allocation, what does that do to the return assumptions, and if so, are there any funding requirements and implications? So, like I said, myself, our actuary Steve Lemansky, and Mike Lepore from GYL have been meeting a couple times during the past month, and they have some results they'd like to share with us. And so at that point, I'll turn it over to Mike and Jerry.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you. So before we start, if I may, I know most of you know Jerry, haven't seen him in a number of years, but he's the CEO of our firm, and I had mentioned at the last meeting, he just wants to come and say a couple of words, if I may, and then we'll get into the deck that I've handed out to everyone.
Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. Mike had warned me that you have a full agenda, so I'm not going to take up very much time. I just wanted to express our heartfelt appreciation for the many years that we've worked with you and for the trust that you place in us. And without further ado, I'm going to give it back to Michael.
Great.
Short and sweet.
So that was quick.
Michael, you're up.
Thank you. So I handed out a brief deck. Jim did a great job kind of explaining, but in essence, what we're thinking about, and this, for those of you that have been members of this board for a long, long time, and I know many of you have, you may recall back in the early 2000s when we had higher interest rates, this is a kind of something that this pension plan had actively done, was seek to match a discrete set of the underlying liabilities. The idea is, as Jim had mentioned, is really to have bonds come due consistent with when the liabilities need to be paid. The idea is essentially, match your short-term obligations with short-term assets that'll be less volatile and will have, maturity date consistent with when those liabilities come due, and then let the longer-term liabilities kind of do what happens over time, and that is the equity market grows over time. It will help to provide a hedge against inflation, et cetera. So that's something that we had done many years ago. More recently, and really over the past decade or more, as interest rates have been as low as they have, it's been more and more challenging to immunize a significant amount of liabilities, and the amount that we have done has come down over the past 18 months or so. As everyone's well aware, interest rates have cycled back up, and so we feel that it presents a unique opportunity to lengthen the amount of, or increase the amount of liabilities that are matched without reducing the discount rate on the pension plan. And so if you turn to tab 1, what is page 4, you'll just notice we have a few observations. I'll spare you just reading them all to you, but the big picture is that the duration of your total benefits or your total commitments is 14 years. This is part of the project that we worked on with the finance director as well as your actuary. And based on the way the yield curve is currently positioned, the projected the current asset allocation immunizes about 4 years of liabilities. Now, because of the higher interest rates, what we're recommending tonight is to increase the fixed income allocation to 55% of the portfolio, and that would continue to support a 6.5% assumed rate of return, so there will be no change to the return assumptions. But because of higher rates, and now granted, these calculations were done last week, so they will change day to day, but this is certainly reasonably accurate. That would immunize somewhere between 5 and 6 years of liabilities. So ultimately, our recommendation for this evening is to reduce the assumed rate of return for the police pension from 6.5 down to 6. Or no, excuse me, I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn. To maintain that at 6.5%, I jumped ahead to the OPEB. Sorry about that. And but increase the fixed income allocation to 55%. And if you turn to the next page, you'll see, if you look at the column that says 45% equities, 55% fixed income, which is the second column in from the right, that would be the proposed asset allocation. So essentially what we're doing is we're carving some dollars away primarily from U.S. Small and mid cap, as well as from international equities, slight reduction in REITs and the master limited partnerships, and increasing the investment grade bond portfolio from 35% to about 44.5% of the portfolio. And as you can see, just below the black line, in the row that says arithmetic mean, that's the projected 1-year return. So this asset allocation still supports that 6.5%. You can see it's coming in at 6.54%.
So, Michael, the current policy is the far left, that column on the far left?
Correct.
Okay. And so then the other columns are for illustrative purposes?
Correct. We looked at a number of different portfolios, and ultimately decided that with the guidance of the finance director that one of the goals would be to maintain the 6.5% expected rate of return, and so that's how we all kind of coalesced on that 45% equity, 55% fixed income.
So it's the column on the right-hand side there,
This second column.
this one there?
Yeah.
Okay,
The second one.
oh, this one,
Yeah.
okay.
And this is the current one here.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. And as far as, and you're able to extend the duration of the bonds, is that how you do this, or?
Correct.
For what's, I know you were talking about the duration the last time, so what does that do to, comparatively do to it?
So what would happen is there would be a fair amount of cash that would go to the fixed income manager because we would be reducing the equity exposure by 10% of the portfolio. So that works out to, somewhere around $2.7, $2.8 million that would go to the fixed income manager, who would then use that to lengthen the duration of the bond portfolio and more closely approximate the liabilities of the plan.
And what does that do to your risk factors that you always talk about each presentation, Mike?
Sure, no, that's a great question, and you can actually see if we look at the two columns that we had focused in on before, the far left that says current target and one in from the right that says 45 equity, 55 fixed income, you'll see the standard deviation, which is a measure of total risk, goes from 10.9 down to 9.3. So that's using rough mental math, about a 12% reduction in risk. The Sharpe ratio, which is a measure of risk-adjusted return, goes up. So in essence, there's a higher expected return per unit of risk that's taken. You can see it goes from 64 to 70, so it's about a 10% increase in the Sharpe ratio. Sharpe ratio, without going too deep into it, is basically the return that you can expect minus the return you can expect from riskless assets, namely cash, and then divided by standard deviation or total risk. So what it's telling you is how much return you can expect per unit of risk that you're taking. So all things being equal, a higher Sharpe ratio is better. And then if you look at the last two rows, the daily VAR and the worst case, these get to the downside. VAR is short for value at risk. The way to think of it is basically a terrible day in the market, and don't extrapolate it. It's really a one-day number, but think back to very significant historical events. The day after the economy went into lockdown, the day after 9/11, the day after Pearl Harbor, whatever it may be. Kind of catastrophic sort of events in the short term for the market gives you an idea as to how much you can expect the value to decline during that any one-day period. The worst case scenario gets to is a one-year number, and that's based on what they call a normal distribution. It encompasses about 95% of your experience. That gives you an idea as to what the downside risk is for any given year. So again, you can see, lower numbers are better, less risk, less downside.
Okay, that's good. Questions? Charlie?
Michael, on page 4, in the fourth bullet down that starts actuarial accrued, can you give that to me in another layman's term?
Absolutely. Basically what this is saying is that you have relatively short liabilities, in that 57% of your total liability of the plan is going to fund members who are in pay status or currently receiving benefit payments.
And so 57% of the members?
Correct.
Okay.
Are currently receiving benefit payments.
Okay.
Okay, so, Jim, any other comments on this?
Just one real quick, because one of the things that started this discussion back a month ago was I was at a pension conference, and when you start looking at the higher rates, one of the questions I asked was, well, if you take your schedule, why couldn't we go to 696? If we did nothing theoretically, then our liability would be reduced because it got discounted by a higher rate. And I got so much pushback from actuaries on that. That it was like, okay, well, let's just keep it the same.
Keep it, yeah.
So that's the other aspect of this.
Gotcha.
So, and that's essentially what we're doing tonight. So to go in the other direction would be certainly a push to make the actuary probably do the same. And then we would take more risk by not getting actuarial benefits. So if we say 6.5, we might as well take less risks. And
Sure.
do what Michael's outlined.
Yeah.
Our view is that this Board of Finance historically has been very conservative with its approach. Ultimately, the goal of the pension is not necessarily to achieve the the highest return, but it's to make sure that the assets are available to make your pension benefit payments. And so there's an opportunity in the markets that will allow us to dial down the risk without having to change the assumption.
Now, Jim, on the policy we have now, what's the range that is for fixed income?
I'd have to look, but I mean, basically, we were about 45%, but the range was probably 40 to 60.
Yeah, I believe
Right, so
that.
this is within range.
Yeah.
It's just, this is a rebalance, essentially.
It's basically our target, so
Right.
like when you see like the quarterly reports, you'll see the targets.
The target will
And you'll
adjust.
see how that's evolved over time.
Right, right.
So if you were to act on this, you will see these asset classes match the targets of the 45, 55, and the fact that they're.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to adopt this recommendation of 4555.
So moved.
Been moved by Harry,
Second.
seconded by Jeff. Additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Mike and Jerry, on that. Next is
Yeah.
OPEB.
Just one other quick comment. I put current rebalancing for you since we last met last month. I just thought the Board of Finance would like an update as to the valuations. And actually, if you look at the second page on this, you get to the kind of the heart of the matter, the area highlighted in green, the change in the market value net of contributions and withdrawals plus $885,000. So when we last met, it was on a kind of at a valley, if you will, in market valuation. So I just wanted to show you the growth that we've seen since the end of the page.
That's in the last 30 days?
Since September 30th.
Okay, September 30th, got it.
I don't have that.
So moving on to the OPEB, tab 2, we are, the logic behind this is substantially similar. However, there are some of the details are slightly different. The OPEB, as you're all very well aware, is overfunded. It's currently about 160% funded, so that gives you a significant cushion as far as funding is concerned. In fact, you kind of have you have a negative amortization of the overfunding, and so there's really an opportunity here to immunize more of those liabilities. Now, when you overfunded the OPEB a couple of years ago, you may recall, we started a dollar cost averaging program. We invested the cash in treasury bills, and every 6 months, we leg that into the market. What we're recommending tonight is an adjustment to that to that strategy, and the reason is simply because of the market conditions. When we started doing that, interest rates were near zero. There was a desire to kind of reduce the timing risk of making that large deposit. However, since that time, interest rates have come up, and we can get returns from fixed income that are more consistent and more palatable, quite frankly, than zero interest rates. And so we think it merits revisiting that strategy. The strategy is still perfectly good. It worked very well while it was in place, but we think that there's a market opportunity here. And so with regards to the OPEB, your current allocation of, your current discount rate is 6.5%. We're going to recommend reducing that down to 6%. And that will still keep you significantly overfunded. However, if you turn to page 10 and look at the spreadsheet of the asset allocation, we're going to focus in on the middle column, which is 30% equities, 70% fixed income. And if we adjust the portfolio to include that, and cease with the dollar cost averaging and kind of invest that cash that we had sitting on the sidelines in the broad allocation, 70% bonds, 30% stocks, that will satisfy the 6% return assumption. The plan will still be overfunded. There'll still be excess funding to negatively amortize, while at the same time we'll be able to immunize somewhere between 21 and 22 years of projected liabilities for the OPEB. So that really gives you a tremendous amount of clarity. Now, the reason that we didn't, and we did look at other things like 90-10 and 20-80, or excuse me, 1090 and 2080, using even more fixed income, which financially can be supported by the economics of the OPEB trust. However, because healthcare liabilities are much more variable and less predictable than the pension liabilities, the conclusion was that it would be more prudent to keep a little more in equities at this point. And so the recommendation is twofold. One, to reduce the return on asset assumption from 6.5 to 6, and then two is to reallocate to 30% equities, 70% fixed income for the OPEB, which will immunize somewhere between 21 and 22 years.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Questions on the recommendation?
And Michael, because we're so overfunded, are we going to make a contribution this coming year?
A small one,
Small
yes.
one.
There's two pieces to the funding. There's what's called the normal cost. That's the cost of just running the pension plan, and that you have to make every year. And then there's the amortization of the unfunded liability. Because you are overfunded, you actually have a negative amortization of that unfunded liability, but you can't, you can't make contributions kind of go away, if you will. So it's a modest number. I think it was what?
Yeah, it would go about 31,000, yeah.
32,000, yeah. So it's a fairly nominal number, but there is a small contribution that would require.
The other thing I want to emphasize, because in rereading my letter, I think it could be a little misleading. When I was talking about immunizing, completely immunizing liabilities, that's under the 80% fixed, 20% equities, and that's completely for the amortization period of the OPEB trust from the last valuation. It's not to suggest that in 25 years from now, somebody's going to come back and look at the OPEB budget and say, well, the finance director 24 years ago said we completely immunized it.
I wouldn't worry about that, but
Okay.
that's good for the clarification.
But I mean, so what'll happen though is, so the question is, well, do we just go from, I'll just call it to today, 31,000 to, 900,000, and over time, these are snapshots in time, and over time, the valuations every 2 years should sort of adjust that a little bit. And the other thing on the funding status is, OPEB valuations have become more refined over the years, and we've sort of had a couple of good things that have gone for us. So again, during that period, one is we took opportunities to take money from a self-insurance fund, which this board has approved twice, to go into the OPEB trust. And then we also coupled that with some favorable experience. And then also, we got some boost from moving into the partnership plan. And the actuaries are probably a little less conservative than they were early on. Again, OPEB and sort of the life cycle of a town is really something that's still relatively new. So be that as it may, it's good news, but I don't want to suggest that in year 25, everything's gone. So.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so I'm going to entertain a motion to adopt the recommendations from the finance director and the financial advisors on the OPEB, which would lower the assumption from 6.5 to 6, and then adopt a 70-30 ratio of investments.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Victor, seconded by Pam. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you. Just for your, just to update you on the OPEB as well. We just brought an update, and similar column, similar dollars, actually $811,000 in growth since the end of the quarter.
All right. Thank you,
Great.
Mike.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Chair. Take care. Okay, item number 4 is to consider and if appropriate approve Community Foundation's ARPA recommendations per the attached list and approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance pursuant to the efforts of the Branford Community Foundation recommends to the RTM the following ARPA allotments out of the previous ARPA allocation of $395,000. Jim, you're handling that?
Well, I'm going to ask the Branford Community Foundation to come up. Just by way of background, I know this board is familiar, but for those who are just tuning into the whole ARPA allocation, is that of the roughly $8.2 million, the town had opted to elect a standard allowance, which allowed us to support government functions. We have, to some extent in past budgets, done small amounts to outside agencies, but we thought this gave us an opportunity to assist the nonprofit community. And this board, the Board of Finance, had basically allotted $425,000, but we were tasked with coming up with a distribution channel. And admittedly, this isn't something we're necessarily skilled at, and the finance department doesn't have the bandwidth to do it themselves. And so the thinking was, well, let's engage the services of the Branford Community Foundation, who does this on an annual basis with their own funds. They were seen as as we believe, a trusted source in Branford. In addition to doing this in Branford, they've been doing it in Guilford as well. And I don't want to steal their thunder because they will walk through their approach, their process, and their recommendations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liza, Petra, and her team.
Thanks, Jim. You already did steal the thunder, though, by sending the recommendations over. So the drum rolls over. So, hi, everyone. I'm Liza Jansen-Petra. I'm the Executive Director of the Branford Community Foundation. Jim mentioned this, but I also am the Executive Director of the Guilford Foundation, which is an entirely separate entity, and we are doing the same process through the Guilford Foundation for Guilford. So we're getting really good at ARPA in our back office. And I have with me our board chair, Stephanie Donegan-Dietz, the chair of the ARPA Review Committee, Amy Etzel, and our wonderful consultant, George Kribda, who is the expert on all things ARPA, because it is not an intuitive process. So I see that you have received the PowerPoint presentation that I put together, and I thought it was important to go through that first, just to provide some contextual information about how the decisions came to be, so that you could understand sort of the intensity and the diligence of the project itself. I'm incredibly proud of the work that our volunteer committee put together, led by Amy, to review these applications, each one scrutinized, to really come up with a proposal for you that we think presents the best investment of the funds that you have allocated for our nonprofit community. So I'll just start going through this document right now. So the document itself, I'm going to talk about what our charge was from the town, so from you, and in partnership with Jim Finch and First Selectman Jamie. I'll talk about the application process, sort of how we put it together, because this was a pioneering process for us, and George can speak to this as well. Guilford and Branford are the only two towns that we know of, in Connecticut at least, that used a community foundation to provide these services to help fund nonprofit organizations. So we created this project based on our existing application process. I'll talk a little bit about the review itself, sort of the ways in which we considered each application, and then finally just a summary of the application, of the recommendations, which you already have. So I apologize in advance. There's a duplicate on the first two slides, so pick one or the other and follow along. So our mission of the Branford Community Foundation, we are a charitable nonprofit independent organization, and our mission is to improve the well-being of the Branford community by connecting people who care with the causes that matter now and for generations to come. I think one of the reasons that First Selectman Cosgrove and Jim approached us is because we had a real history in 2020 during the pandemic, where we pivoted, like everybody else, our work, and raised over $200,000 directly from the community through a project called Branford Has Heart. And we raised those dollars and distributed all of those funds back out into the community. Our goal was to raise $20,000, and Branford, being Branford, said, well, how about we double, or I guess 100 that. You're the finance guys, have the other guys come back and talk about that. So anyway. So through those funds, we distributed 33 grants to organizations. So in February of this year, Mr. Cosgrove and Mr. Finch approached us to talk about, was there a way that we could help the town distribute some of those funds to the nonprofit community. So from there, from February to May 2023, we did our research. We identified what the particulars are for the ARPA funding, because it's not, it's a little bit different from ours. We wanted to be sure we were following in line with what the Treasury indicated. We hired George to be the expert, so anything that is wrong with the process is really George's fault. So that's what consultants get paid for.
Tonight, yeah.
No, it's great to have George, who, you know, has deep experience within federal government work and with federal applications and grants distribution. So then we looked at what the rules were for these funds, and then worked with the town to really think about what are the priorities for our community that we really want to fund and support. After that, we named an ARPA review committee. We started with our own board of directors. We have what we call a community investment committee, and that committee is responsible for reviewing all of the grant applications that come into our organization every year. But we wanted to expand that group out to be more reflective and representative of the community. So we added several more names, and the names are coming up. We created a unique application to ensure we were receiving and collecting the information that we needed to achieve our ends. And then we created a timeline. So moving on to the funding priorities, this was important for us. The organization had to demonstrate a negative economic impact created or exacerbated by COVID-19, which, as you can imagine, just about everybody did. And so from there, we narrowed it a little bit more. What were the most important priorities for us to consider? And we looked at how COVID had really truly impacted communities throughout the country, and particularly in Branford. So we prioritized basic needs, which is food, shelter, emergency financial assistance. We wanted to support populations that were potentially disparately impacted by COVID. We wanted to ensure that we were supporting mental health services. We also recognized that organizations like arts and culture, those that create joy, were also impacted negatively by the pandemic. It was important to look at children and youth to ensure that those organizations were addressed. And above all, to strive for impact in Branford. So we wanted to make sure that the organizations we were supporting really made a difference in the Branford community. The next page shows you who was on the committee. You probably recognize many of these folks: Amy, Stephanie, Kathleen Fox. She is a retired social worker. Heather Hackley works with Guilford Savings Bank. Chuck Tiernan, pretty sure you know. Community members included Rita Berkson, Peter Semino from the town, Gretchen Dale, Dave Etzel, Margot Hardenberg, and Rachel Sexton, who's just the retired assistant superintendent. We wanted to be sure we had the school and education represented. And then we had the three staff who are non-voting members, so it was myself, my colleague Jennifer Mullet, and then George, our super consultant. So we felt as though we had a good representation of expertise on that committee. So then the application process, we wanted to be sure that all of the organizations that were eligible were going to be able to have access to apply for these. So in May 31st, we held a public meeting at the community house. We had about 55 people there. We wanted to hear from organizations about what we should be striving for and looking at. And that was a great, lively conversation. Then we spent May, June, July, and August publicizing the opportunity. We did social media, we went through the local papers, we did email blasts, we sent our own emails out to our constituents. I wanted to be sure everyone knew the opportunity was available. And then we finalized things. We held a grantee workshop on June 28th. We had about 40 people in attendance. It was here, actually. And if anyone was here, you remember we had a massive technology fail, but we pushed through because that's what we do. And the applications were due on September 8th, so just a couple of months ago. So once we received the application, that ARPA review committee met 7 times over the last 6 weeks. That included some training and preparing recommendations. Every committee member completed a conflict of interest form identifying any potential conflicts they may have. If they were on the board of an organization or had a relative, we wanted to be sure we understood that. And also a confidentiality form so that the process would be really protected. Our ARPA consultant, George, reviewed each and every application to judge it for, eligibility under the federal guidelines, if there were any enumerated, to ensure that it had demonstrated this negative economic impact, and whether the amount the organizations were applying for were actually in line with what the application stated. Then each committee member reviewed every application, and then we had a lead and a seconder and went through this incredible process over those 7 meetings. So finally, what you all know already, at the end of the day, as Mr. Finch mentioned, we had $395,000 as our budget. We received 27 applications requesting almost double what we had available. They ranged from $2,000 to $75,000. And so through our process, we ended up recommending to you 25 grants for funding, totaling that 395. 16 of those grants are recommended for full funding, 7 for partial funding. One application, you'll hear, the Chamber of Commerce, I think, is coming up behind us. We referred it back to the town for funding through a different process. We recognize that the applicant probably had definitely been impacted by the COVID pandemic, but was not a charitable organization and needed to be considered through a different process than this one. And then one application was not recommended for funding. And you have all of those numbers and that data. And I know that what was sent to you in advance showed what was recommended. I want to be sure you got the other document that showed what was requested versus what was recommended. Okay. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about the process.
Thanks, Liza. Questions from the board? I would note that I'm going to recuse myself from voting on this tonight, but I will help with the discussion here. Is there questions with regards to either Jim's memo or the recommendation as received from the Community Foundation? Charlie?
Okay, now, as I read the narrative, it reads to me as if, well, or maybe you could explain the word suspended. The word suspended membership, well, what does that mean?
Oh,
Yeah,
Because
Charlie, I think that one is the second part of the memo, which talks about the economic impact to the Chamber of Commerce. So that will follow
that's
this
separate.
one.
That'll be a next
Yeah,
agenda.
yeah, they mentioned the chamber as a worthy applicant who basically suffered impacts of COVID, but it didn't really fit BCF's definition of charitable organization, and so that's why there's another item following them, so.
I forget that.
I mean, I could try, but
That's all right. Everybody has had a chance to review this?
Joe, I think they did a great job going through the process based on Liza's presentation. I'd like to move forward and make a recommendation to fund.
So you're moving this?
Yes.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded by Harry. Is there additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, abstain.
excellent.
And,
Well, thank you. I actually want to take the opportunity to just thank the town in particular
Yeah.
for asking us to do this process. It was really exciting and invigorating, and we're really
Thank
pleased
you.
with the results. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 5 is to consider and if appropriate,
That's it.
approve the allocation of $25,000 in ARPA funds previously returned to the town, to the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce to offset losses, and approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM a grant to the Shoreline Chamber of $25,000. This grant will be funded through ARPA dollars previously returned to the town and will be repurposed to offset the Chamber's revenue lost during the pandemic. And Jim addresses that in the November 22nd memo, which I think you were questioning, Charlie.
Yeah.
Jim, you have
Yeah, and
Any additional
actually,
comments on that?
Pete Jacob is here from the chamber. But, basically, what the chamber, through their application to the BCF is basically saying that, they had revenue loss, and part of the revenue loss was unable to have events, and the other one was they weren't getting membership revenue because they, as I understood it, suspended membership fees. They didn't kick any, it's not like suspended from school, nobody's getting kicked out of it. They're just not charging them fees. Is that a faithful representation?
In essence, what we did is we did not force collections on people because for the members, their opportunity to still be marketed and have their outside listing and online directories and all would be a disadvantage during the COVID period. We waived collection and wrote off those membership fees to a tune of over $64,000 overall. In Branford, it was $36,390,000.
Got it, okay. Questions?
As I read the narrative, like the word suspended means that you took some action to allow the people to remain members, but didn't try to collect their membership fees.
I didn't use the word suspended typically. I think that's, we did not go to collection on those, so we in essence.
So those members remain members?
They remain members
So
and
in a
receive.
sense, we're funding their membership now.
No, because each year there's new benefits. So if you're thinking about to make up a loss, so we have two elements of loss that we have. One is from April of 2021 through 2022, we had revenue loss due to events that we could not hold due to either the health department restrictions that we had, people not wanting to do certain things, not being able to get facilities to do certain things. And that event total for the chamber was $167,000 in lost income versus those same events in 2018 and 2019. That is one aspect of the economic harm that we had. Of that, because about 45% of our effort and income come from the town of Branford, that aspect that we associate with Branford is about a $43,577 loss. In addition, as we expanded our education efforts throughout the shoreline area to anyone and everyone, and had those benefits, we just didn't do collections in terms of membership for those that were struggling and could not pay, because we felt adding economic insult to injury didn't quite make sense. So there are two aspects of the impact. The total impact that we have associated with Branford due to events and to the membership aspect, which was $31,000, is a total of $75,000 of economic harm out of the total of $167,000.
In other words, so I can't look at it as saying that because you suspended the membership fees, they retain their rights and privileges as a member. So in a sense, aren't we funding their membership fees that were due?
No, I think what she's saying, Charlie, is that in the numbers that Jim provided are a little different,
Yeah.
but, so on that memo, the income loss was $75,000, and then the memberships that revenue that didn't get collected was $36,000. So Jim's memo points to a reduced revenue of $103,000. And then likewise, they had $94,000 reduction from the Guilford portion of it.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that's really, and so that because the funds are fungible, it's like, it can be allocated in any fashion, depending on how you look at it. But I don't know what other impacts you had for expenditure side, or what your
So
net reduction in fund balance was, but maybe that might be helpful too.
So obviously that, like any organization that existed during that time period, we had an impact on revenue, and it's predominantly, those are the two sources that we have. During that time period, we were able to receive a PPP grant, as well as a grant from the Branford Community Foundation and the Guilford Foundation to make up for, to keep us operational. We cut severely our staff. We went from 5 people down to 2 part-time people. We moved out of our rental office in Branford because we couldn't afford the rent there in order to ensure that we were still being able to provide services that were of interest to the community during COVID, from an education standpoint, from a PPP standpoint, from an EIDL standpoint, from a health standpoint. So the economic impact has a longer term range than just this time period. Any of you who have businesses knows to ramp up to where you were prior to COVID is not necessarily instantaneous. And we also saw a reduction in our cash reserves. Net was about a $60,000 reduction in cash reserves after receiving PPP funds and 2 grants from the 2 community foundations.
Okay, we have additional questions?
I'll move it.
Victor, you going to move this?
I am.
Second.
Motion's been made by Victor, seconded by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Oh, I abstain.
Thank you. Okay, so carried. Thank you.
Thank you. I promise not to come back next November.
Okay, take care. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 6, to hear presentation from BL Companies regarding the Walsh Intermediate School Field Improvement Project. Good evening.
Good evening, Board. My name is Dominic Saltruda with BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway out of Meriden, Connecticut. I am the lead landscape architect for BL Companies, and I was retained by the town of Branford approximately a year ago to perform a twofold project, of which we're going to go over tonight. I think you guys have it in your packet, but a little explanation of the project itself. We were retained to do a townwide field study, as well as look at improvements to the Francis Walsh Intermediate School. When we were selected, one thing, and it was actually put on tonight for a field improvements project at Walsh Field, we've always considered it site improvements to the Walsh Intermediate School, not just the fields. There's a lot of other elements that go into that site. Throughout the course of the past year, we've had public meetings that have to do with the study. They occurred on May 16th, June 22nd, and October 17th. This project was moved through a design that was inclusive of both the needs of the school and also the community. We went through the Inland Wetlands Commission, both in July and August, Planning and Zoning Commission up to October, and we've also met with the Board of Education on a couple of different occasions and 2 different superintendents and their facilities people. I would like to thank both the Selectmen, Parks and Rec Department, and the Board of Education for their collaboration and coordination, and a lot of other stakeholders, both on the community side and as well as the town side, to the development of the project. The picture you guys are opening up right now that you see before me, I'm going to orient you to. Once you open it up, on the right-hand side is the road Damascus. The school is on the lower side. North will be to your right, and I'll discuss a little bit of what we saw and the vision we saw for the school. We studied the school first and foremost. We wanted to know the understanding of the programming, of the educational needs that go on that middle school. Very well laid out middle school in terms of its physical characteristics and as well as its educational value in terms of the programming on it. One thing we noticed right away is the safety, security aspects and accessibility of the school and surrounding the school were optimal, but the site elements outside near the fields and also the accessible programming areas for the students were a little below what we would like to see. So we took a holistic approach to the design or the layout and the vision for the outdoor space and programming, taking our cues from actually the school itself. One thing we looked at right away was it was over-programmed in terms of what was existing out on site. Out on site before this design you're looking at, there was a softball field. There were multiple smaller program areas, 18 swings on 2 swing set areas, a couple of undersized basketball courts and a hard surface play area. There was a baseball field, 2 underutilized athletic multi-purpose fields, and for no better terminology, a ropes type adventure course. So a lot of staged wooden structures where you can climb and do different types of events on. Once we discovered we were over-programmed, we made the decision or the recommendation to remove the baseball field and the what we call high adventure course from the programming area. We also wanted to soften the buffers to the surrounding wetland areas, which on this piece of paper are to the top, to the left, and to the bottom. They drain out along the top of the screen towards Damascus Road. Once we discovered what the program could be, we wanted to draw both athletic fields that could be used by the school, but also the community. But we also wanted to provide aspects for the student body and the teachers that inhabit the school. We started looking at the opportunity areas. One thing became very evident. We wanted to have everything to be universally accessible. So any person that navigates the site can do so uninhibited and basically without any barriers. The other thing we wanted to do is any program area out on site, we wanted to make sure was accessible. So the existing softball field on the right-hand side, you'll notice we're providing accessible routes to the use areas, which are the viewing areas to watch a game, and also the areas for the actual participation in that event. Once we noticed the programming, we wanted some school programming to brought in as well. Some of the educational needs, we wanted an outdoor classroom / small amphitheater, and by small amphitheater I mean 12 to 18 students on a sloping area where a student could teach a class outside. That occurs just below the basketball court in the center of the diagram you see. We wanted to make sure we could reincorporate playscapes. The middle school does have recess. They have 5th grade. We wanted to make sure we provided open and basically engaging areas, but areas where children can break off into smaller groups to socialize and obviously promote some sort of physical fitness activities as well. So we have one playscape that's located to the right-hand side of the screen with a swing set and a climber, and then we put another swing set in the middle near 2 reimagined basketball courts. One is a full-size basketball court, which they didn't have at the school, and then a smaller sport court. These courts were configured in such a way because we were sensitive to the underlying area of wetlands that we have on the site, so they double as walkways to other areas of the site. Just above the 2 basketball courts, we provide an area with a small restroom facility that provides both restroom, a place to provide a linkage for power that we'll talk about later, water for irrigation to be stowed in a convenient location. To the left is one of the bigger portions of the project. The 2 fields that were currently out there were underutilized in terms of their use. So we proposed a 2-step process where we're improving both of those fields. We're raising those fields approximately 1.5 feet from their original grade, by which providing carrying capacity or water capacity underneath them. They will be synthetic, and they will be surrounded by a 4-lane walking surface that's basically a pavement walking surface, which will provide physical fitness areas and also encapsulates the 2 fields. To the left of that, you'll see a big green amoeba-looking object on the left-hand side. They are scattered amongst the entire site, and these are giant rain gardens where we're actually giving back up to 2.5 acres of naturalization surrounding the fields. If you imagine, or if you've been out to the site currently, the fields go almost right to the water lines of the wetlands that surround this area. We're pulling everything back, so we're 30 to 50 feet in certain areas from those water lines, and we're going to give that area back to nature. On the left-hand side, we're also providing an educational nook that overlooks a pollinator garden for establishment on the south side of the actual campus. Some of the other highlights of note are all the paths are done in such a way that they're ADA accessible. We removed any barriers coming out of the building and cascading down into these areas. We've also provided field lighting for both the 2 fields and the softball field. So if you imagine, all 3 fields would have field lighting provided to them. The current configuration of circulation within the school's bus system or walkways has remained intact. The emergency access road has been maintained and widened. It's been run through a series of engineering elements to make sure that we can get trucks in and out of that facility as it does today. The current parking lot along Damascus remains in its current configuration. With that said, that's the high level. I was told I had 15 minutes. I could talk for an hour, and I know you're busy, and I think the police are behind me, so I would open it up to questions, but I you know, hey guys. That's the high level of what we've done. The next thing is the opinion of probable cost for construction of this project. We break down from high levels, and you guys are going to probably break it down even more than I've done. I talk in generals, and I like to round up. There are specific numbers that you all can see. The erosion sediment controls for the site are elevated at approximately $155,000. The site demolition and site prep is approximately $361,000. General site improvements, adding the playscapes and things along those lines, is $1.2 million plus or minus. The construction of the new synthetic fields is $4.2. The construction of the softball field improvement is around $800,000. There's some miscellaneous items in there. We're providing universal storage rather than sheds on site, so we're going to be using storage containers that can be moved around and pushed back and forth between sites. That's about $25,000. The overall landscaping for the site is around $117,000. We have carried a robust contingency for this project. In light of the way we calculate our estimates as we start reviewing areas in the Northeast region and the general vicinity of this project. We've seen a lot of market volatility both in the labor portion and in the materials portion of our bids coming in the last 3 to 6 months. So that's why we've carried a robust contingency, which puts the overall fee estimated at $7.5 million.
Okay. Jamie, you have comments on this?
Yeah, so I think it is important to note with getting at this project, and as you know, I think Dominic correctly stated, it is a site improvement project for the school. You may recall when the Board of Education was adopting their ed specs prior to the Walsh project, it was decided to remove touching any of the fields because of the lack of reimbursement. It wasn't anticipated to be eligible for reimbursement at that time. However, I think as we went through the project and also hearing from not only people who go to the school, staff, but also members of the community, they thought there was probably a missed opportunity to address a lot of the things that needed to be addressed. The accessibility is huge. I think that is something that needs to be addressed. Really, there is very little, if any, accessibility to that field or any of the amenities on that site. In terms of the fields, and as Dominic said, the site was over-programmed. So I think we're correcting that, and it's really the project here is a project that really meets the school district's programmatic needs, as well as will address some of the community needs as well. You may recall when we funded the Walsh project, and there was a lot of discussion regarding the improvements that would be made to the pool and the gym, as well as the addition of the auditorium. However, that project ended up getting support or maintained the support through the process in large part because of, it was also viewed as not only addressing the school's needs, but it was also a community asset. And I think that's how we need to look at these fields and these improvements as a community asset.
Thanks, Jamie. Jim, what's the status of the appropriation for the intermediate school? Is there any?
Yeah, it's still an active project. We've been in communication with the consultant or owner's rep, Colliers, and I think they're really winding down for the final closeout now. It is less than what the full appropriation was. You know, we did bond $59 million for that, and so you know, we're anxious to get it closed out so we could see you know, if there's, you know, close the authorization and use some of that cash for other items going forward.
Okay, thank you, sir. And the application for reimbursement is in, and eligible costs are being determined?
Well, there's some change orders that I think was kind of the issue that they're trying to get resolved with the state. I don't know if Chris has any more.
So that'll go into the
information.
mix of any conversation going forward?
I'm sorry, say that?
I said that will go into the mix as far as any conversation going forward with regards to these requests?
Yes, that's going to be another consideration, yep.
Okay, thanks. Questions, Charlie?
Yeah, Dominic, I'm looking at this, at the schematic, I haven't seen it before. Can I see a softball field, a full basketball court, a half basketball, swings, and 2 fields? Are the 2 fields football size?
The 2 fields are actually almost comparable to what they have out there right now, but there's a great difference. These are going to be from the bottom of your page across. You can see there's a football field on one side and a full-size soccer on the other.
Okay. Are they the same size?
No, they're different sizes.
Okay.
The football field's a little thinner than a normal regulation soccer field,
Okay.
but it is 2 fields. I mean, you can play football, soccer on one side. You can run 2 soccer games at the same time. And then obviously we had to take into account field hockey and lacrosse on
And there's a
striping.
track around, right?
Yeah, it's not a true track. It's more of a walking track. It's going to be 4 lanes. We are going to stripe it for the 100-yard dash. It's not going to be a track surface. It's going to be a bituminous surface. It's surrounding it. When we go to the 2 fields, we can't even fit what's called a fat track design in. We can't. It's over 400 meters, but it'll be ticked off so they know how long they're going to do it.
Is there anything new on here, like is a basketball court new?
Yes. Everything you see on here has been relocated. The current basketball courts sit where the playscapes are on the right-hand side below the softball field.
So in red is new?
Everything on this drawing is new. Everything you see colored in is new materials, new walkways. The softball field will be regraded so it has a true softball feel to it. It's going to be fenced in. And that decision was made, and then obviously we're filling in the 2 to make it accessible. The 2 dugouts on the softball field we're going to fill in with concrete at the actual dugouts, and then there'll be bituminous around. There'll be areas for the bleachers to sit on and have viewing areas next to them. Most of it is all new.
If this got a green light sometime, how long?
How long to build or how long?
How long to do this?
To construct something like this, you're looking at what we call 2 seasons. So let's say if we got approval, you can build it over the course of about 8 months. The biggest determination on this is going to be long lead items. Right now, we're seeing 20 months. So that's on some of the stuff like the playscapes. So the fields themselves may be in, but some of the amenities might take longer. That's what we're looking at. The earlier we can get into a bid situation, you can talk with the awarding bodies is those long lead items. Anything with steel right now is long lead. A lot of the playscape manufacturers they're not doing anything until they get approved documents. We've streamlined our processing during that effort to try to streamline that down to get it down weeks wise. But a playscape right now is 20 weeks. So those are those long leads that mess with it. But we say 2 seasons, so if we could, the ideal was to get started after the first of the year, get into construction during the school year. We know there's a disruption, but it's less of a disruption. Get the fields established, a build-out pattern. We can't tell them how to build it, but we'd start further back in the site, have them build outward. and then get some establishment. Once the turf fields, you don't have to wait for the grass to grow. You know, the softball field may take another season. You might not be on it until the following year to make sure it grows in correctly.
So Dominic, regarding the use of synthetic turf versus, is there any issues with regards to that?
There's no issues that we foresee. We have specification for testing before they come in. It was brought to light during inland wetlands in terms of hazardous material, PFAS, things like that, microplastics. We've addressed all of those either in utilization of the materials in the testing prior to being on site. Most of your PFAS issue comes from a manufacturing process where it's an adherence issue. A lot of the manufacturers don't use it anymore. We call it specification. Everything's tested before it comes to the site to conform. For microplastics, we have done a belt and suspenders design, as we call it, where we're going to have an interceptor drain on the low end of the site. It is there purely to collect any debris that may come off the field. It was the other reason why we established the buffer areas around the field as well, to capture any sort of catchment so it doesn't get into the water system. The infill material will be a 60-30, 60, we're working on it right now. It'll be crumb rubber and sand, similar to the high school. And I think Jamie did a test. Since the town was understanding of studying both the needs of the school and also the needs of the town, the study started dictating that a secondary synthetic field was definitely necessary. Once you have one in town, it gets overused, so this is going to give an alternate use for the high school's synthetic field as well.
Okay. Victor?
What about synthetic turf from an injuries point of view? There's been a lot of press about that.
Yeah, a lot of that press is, and I don't want to get into it, but a lot of it's, you got to remember where it's coming from. It's coming from the Players Association, the National Football League Players Association. You can look at injuries in terms of, we are going to be installing a G-Shock pad underneath this, so the shocking injuries will be less in terms of that movement. If it's maintained correctly, you will have less turning movement injuries. A lot of the turning movement injuries, including myself, was done on AstroTurf, which was the harder turf system where you give. This doesn't give and it buckles. My left knee can be a testament to that. On this, it's a different type of material. It's going to have more and more give. You have the same type of injuries on natural turf that's not maintained to the optimal. And I can tell you right now, Alex and the school board do a good job maintaining their fields, but they're not up to optimal maintaining. And optimal maintenance is if you've ever been at like Yankee Stadium or Fenway Park, where it's natural turf and it's, you know, there's a team of people that are on it 24/7. That's optimal, and even then you still have those injuries. So, you know, we don't foresee it. Injuries are going to happen. Most of them can be remedied on either type of field the same way.
Thank you.
Yes. Other questions?
Just
Pam?
the use of it, so you mentioned the high school will be using these, will other just
I don't-
Branford community activities happen there too?
I think the way that they looked at it in terms of the study is, first and foremost, when you have a school zone, during school hours, it is a school use, which is great. I mean, the biggest thing for the artificial is the accessibility for someone who is of limited means. It's going to open up field activity. Only other area you have that for that right now currently is the high school. What I was saying is, right now, your high school usage, it can be taxed because it is the only synthetic field, whereas if you have another field that can be utilized in off-period hours, it lessens that carpet wearing out over the 8 to 10 year life cycle of the carpet. So that's how you look at that. In terms of community use, we always look at in off-peak hours after a set time of whatever the middle school states, and on weekends when they're not having activities, absolutely, this is a community asset. It's another walking track that can be utilized by the community, both young and old. There's a full court basketball, which on the study side identified that there was not enough full-size outdoor courts, so that fits that need. We balanced out the fact that this softball field will be more usable during the weekends now, because it did have a short porch in right field, which means it was shunted a little bit. Now we're expanding it out, so it's going to be true competition, or for Little League, either one. It'll be a skin field, but it can be used for Little League games and or softball or pickup games. The other thing we forgot to mention is obviously the physical education aspects are vast out there for the school itself, having different uses. And then, something, there's no reason why a commencement couldn't be done out on this field for the middle school.
Charlie?
If this goes forward, I think you said it's going to take about 2 years,
Year and a half.
okay, year and a half. So the rec department is aware that this will be out of use for that period of time? They have plans to accommodate?
Yeah, what we looked at during the study was there were some deficiencies in fields, but there was also some perceived deficiencies in fields where I think the rec department can do some movements around. And obviously, we discovered we had an overabundance of baseball fields in one aspect, or I'm sorry, softball fields. Doesn't really seem like that, but they just weren't being utilized. Some of the other parks can be brought online to accommodate for that single use season.
Okay, other questions? If not, Dominic, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up is to hear a presentation from the police chief regarding staffing considerations for police service and the police station renovation project. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening.
Deputy Chief, Commissioner.
I would have yielded all night if, for that presentation, keep our youth busy and physically active. We would have waited all night for that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to let us present some of the challenges we have, both in infrastructure and personnel with the police department. With me here tonight is Deputy Chief John Alves. He's going to speak to the building project that you have in front of you. And we have the support of our Chairman of the Board of Police Commission, John Susalis. So I'm going to hit the personnel side first, give you a quick rundown on that. I do believe you were provided a copy of an assessment, an analysis that was done by Lieutenant Corianne Carangelo. This was a very nicely done document that encapsulated all of our thoughts and, quite frankly, what we've been seeing or internally feeling as our normal operations. We face some challenges and changing conditions in society. Been in front of you before, and the issue of personnel has come up, and I think my responses at that time were, we want to see where we are, let's get a handle on our schedule, and before I come to you with, I want all the facts, and that document in front of you, I think, is a very good case of why I'm in front of you tonight. So this is just an informational presentation about why I'm going to make recommendations in the next budget process to add 2 officers to the police department. I think it's important to understand where we are today, and where we sit today is we have 52 sworn officers in the police department. Out of that 52, you're going to hear me say a couple times tonight about deployment. What I mean by deployment is how many officers we can put out on the street. So when you look at a police agency, first thing you can do is look at the table organization and see if they top heavy, are they mid heavy, or in the bottom. Most agencies should be very heavy in the bottom and slim in the top. With our span and control, and we look at the table organization, there is no room in that table organization for me to cut other positions to try to find money or bodies to put back out on the street. Where what I would term a very lean department. What have we done up to date today? When I first came here and we looked at staffing, we've removed 2 officers that were assigned traffic, that did traffic enforcement duties. They are removed. Those bodies were put back in general patrol for deployment to help offset some of our staffing shortages. Fortunately, we do have a good part-time clerical staff that is talented. We saw a spike in some identity theft crimes, and those don't necessarily necessitate a sworn police officer, so we shifted some resources with our civilian staff. That's a common theme that you'll hear when police departments are trying to optimize their operation. They do that through sworn police officers, the most expensive employee you can have. So you try to civilianize as much as you can, and I think we've done that to the best of our ability, i.e. bringing in a social worker to help out with some of the caseload and the referrals. Up and coming, we are hopefully going to be in talks soon with the union to try to revamp their schedule. They're on what I would term an archaic 5-2 schedule. What they call 5-2 is you basically work 5 days on, you have 2 days off. That's set by bidding. Those days are assigned. So it doesn't really allow even distribution of the officers throughout the 7-day period. A more contemporary schedule, which is really what you need to be competitive in this market today in policing and would better suit us, is what they call the 5-2-5-3. That's 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 3 days off, and it rotates so your days never stay the same. It would evenly put our people across on the 7-day work week. Unfortunately, with this schedule, total hours, it does have some consequences to it, some impact to the operating budget that it would be tough to measure right off the bat, but we can kind of get our heads around that and what it would look like. So those are some of the things that we're already doing before we come in front of you. So in that document, you'll find some very pertinent information and time on calls. But what's important and what really kind of is concerning me, that prompted me to come before you for this budget cycle, was we are consistently operating below staffing. And like I said before, we're a very lean agency. There is no room. If we lose another 2 officers to injury, I'm not really sure where I'm going to pull them. Our detective division is at what I would term minimum staffing. So we're 52 allocated in that budget. One of the charts that I want you to really look at is the hiring cycle or the replacement cycle that's on there. And you've heard me say this before, we are not getting certified applicants anymore. The certified applicant pool is dried up. A couple of reasons. A lot of the officers that did careers young, they don't want to go back in the business. They've had it, they're done. We're seeing that happen across the country. The other part that we're seeing is so competitive right now. If you're a certified officer, you can go wherever you want. So we're seeing what's your schedule, what's your pension. Now, thankfully, years ago, the town did bring back the pension. I'll bet it's not the most competitive pension in the state of Connecticut, but it puts us on good fighting grounds to try to recruit people. Our schedule isn't. We have had recruits come in and certified officers, they hear we're on a 5-2, they're out the door. They're not going to do that schedule. So we don't have the ability to put people into the organization very quickly. If I was able to get 3 or 4 certified officers right away, great, that'd have an immediate impact. But that's not the case, and I don't see it getting any better. Yes, we could raise wages. Yes, we can, look at better schedules. We might be able to attract a few that we've lost. But in the end, it looks like we're going to be in a cycle of hiring what I call recruit officers, which have to go to the academy. So that's at least a year cycle. And that's us putting our foot down and trying to make things happen fast. We're seeing very high failure rates on the polygraph, the psychological, and the backgrounds. So we'll vet 20 people and we'll eliminate 12 to 15 of those people. We've had academy classes that we've almost had to give up because our recruits failed out in that testing process. So what concerns me is that if we're always operating at, say, about 80 to 85%, and I'll use the word capacity of personnel, that gives me no room to incur any more injury retirements. We have 6 officers right now who are eligible to retire. We have 6 others that are eligible to walk out at any day because they've done previous careers with other departments. And they came on, I don't know if any of you were on the board when there was a staffing crisis years ago and they brought in a lot of laterals. So we have 12 people that could walk out of our agency right now. The budget is set. It's 52 officers in that budget book. I cannot hire 53, 54, 55 midstream in a budget process. You wouldn't allow that. Finance director certainly wouldn't allow it. So one of the reasons why the ask for 2 in this budget is not only just to get us where we would someday like to be, but give us that cushion to be able to get bodies, get them hired, get them in the academy. We still not realize them for another year, but that's part of what's driving it. And that's what's kind of one of the most concerning things that I have right now. We have an officer in the DEA task force. As you know, with the opioid crisis, I cannot in good conscience pull that officer from that position. If we have to, we would. But with the challenges we're facing with that, they just did a couple of great cases in this area. That's a priority to us. We have to continue with that. We have an officer that we pulled out of patrol and put in our records division under what we term risk protection order liaison, meaning that officer is assigned to review and submit those risk protection orders. There's a very good section in that document that addresses that. I do not see that position going away. So I'm down 6 total, and that document shows you all the challenges we're facing. Really quickly, I've said it before, there's no universal manpower equation that I can just put in the computer and it says Branford PD needs to be 60 officers. That doesn't exist. What does exist are some, indicators, and I think the biggest one to me is the time on calls, the number of calls, and the number of cops on calls. You'll see the numbers related to our domestic violence and our mental health calls. Those numbers in and of itself justify a staffing increase. You look at the time on the calls, the number of the calls, and the 10-year increase. Unfortunately, if you track mental health, it does not look like those calls are going to be going down anytime soon. So by adding some staff now and hoping to someday get to a number where we can go back to other policing, such as the traffic unit, I'd love to see someone. We had to pull someone out of our detective bureau. We used to rotate an officer. When I say officer, it's what you familiarize yourself with, who's on the road in the police car. They would go through the detective bureau for like a 90-day rotation to learn sex assault investigations, dealing with victims, taking statements, some specialized tools that can help augment the detectives, because again, they are at minimum also. When we have a major crime, it's all hands on deck. That's been eliminated. So question begs is, and I think it was your question, Charlie, is how do you know you've never been at full staff? We've never been there. When we get there, we're going to be a young department, and we will get there. And at that point, we would get back to doing other policing other than core services. Right now, most of our shifts are doing core services, calls for service, traffic enforcement when they can, and anything else you see is essentially overtime or is a struggle to fill. So again, there's no standard model that I can give you. There's some towns in here that are comparison in population. Be careful when you look at other towns. You have to understand what's their call volume, what's their arrest rates, what's their population as far as their service population. You could have a town that's 35 square miles, but they only have 12,000 citizens. So there's a lot that goes into looking at that. But just to highlight a few that I think are close, I'll give you like Westport. That was one that came up. I can assure you that our crime rate is higher than Westport. Our calls for service in the domestic and the mental health, I'm sure, are higher than Westport. They're at 62 sworn officers. Another really good one, East Haven has really bolstered their staff over the past few years. They're up to 62. Again, that's a good number for them. North Haven, which is very comparable in many, many ways, they're at 56, and they are going for more, and there's support for that already. So I envision them to be at 60 by the end of next fiscal year. So you look at Farmington, roughly the same, 57. So there's a whole bunch in there. data and data sets and dashboard indicators for you to digest and look in there. But in the end, I think understanding the demands on the town and the overall town budget, yeah, would it be wonderful to come in and grab, you know, a bunch of cops off the bat? Yes, but I understand the impact that personnel has on the budget, so at 2 to start, and then we reconvene and have another conversation next year. So I can take questions regarding personnel right now, Chair, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Chief. And the request for 2 is you're anticipating for the next budget?
Yeah.
Okay. And currently, how many staff are on workers' comp?
I have one on long-term comp, and unfortunately, one of our police recruits broke their ankle last week in physical training up at the academy, so he is on comp also. He'll get recycled into the next academy class.
Okay. So, and other injuries?
We always average, whether it's maternity leave or comp, we pretty much always run one person short for whatever comp or maternity.
Okay. Thank you. Questions?
Hi, Chief. Like, you know, like the narrative talks about 86% staffing with active people, available people. Like 2 more isn't going to do it, make it 100. Anyway, and then I looked at the ratio per 1,000 residents, and we're the lowest, 1.83.
Yeah, and
Now,
go ahead.
like, you know, there's an axiom like you ask for 4, you expect 3, and you get 2.
I will-
Wait a minute, are you trying to coach him?
I will take,
No, but if you look at all,
this sounds
all
like
the
coaching
deficiencies here,
I will take responsibility for some of that. I am, you know, when it comes to looking at our resources in the budget process, you know, the first couple of years, you know, kind of want to get my hands on the operation to see where we can make some changes, and I think we did. I don't think any of us saw what was coming 3 years ago in policing, and I'm not going to use that as an excuse, but I think that's all the police agencies are struggling in staffing. If we had this conversation 6, 7 years ago, you know, I know I went up against like 3,000 people to try to get on the job. Now we're lucky if we get 30 in a regional testing. So some of this is being driven by that need for the staffing. The other thing is looking deeper into our mental health calls and our domestics and the time on calls. Policing has shifted. When I started on the job, the boss would get mad at you if you were in the house for more than 10 minutes. And if someone didn't want to comply, or we would just say, well, you're going to go. And either you went hands-on. Now we're in this de-escalation. We have to take time. We have to do certain steps. We have to have more people there. So there's a lot of things in play. But to answer your question simply, the first couple of years, yeah, I was just trying to kind of get a good organizational feel and see where we are. I think we knew it, but this document shows it. You know, I would love to take whatever you'll give me. But I also understand, you know, we're not the only game in town.
Pam, you had a question?
Yeah, for the East Haven, were they able to hire certified officers, or are they in the same boat where they were going to academy? Or
Everybody's-
what attracts people to them versus us?
I believe East Haven's in the MERS, the state plan, so there's some benefits to that. So some of the municipalities, we can, I don't want to talk plans because I know Jim's looking at me, but I'm very comfortable. I'm very comfortable with our plan. I think we're a very fiscally sound town, but certain PDs, and I'm not speaking to East Haven, certain PDs have various standards. Our standards, we vetted many, many certified officers, and as we vet them, if we don't feel they're a good fit or they don't meet our standards, we're not going to take them. So you're seeing some differences across different PDs across the state.
Right, and ideally, you'd want to get the recruits coming out of the academy with more senior officers before they retire, so you can sort of have that mentoring a bit, right?
Yeah, that's exactly correct, and you kind of highlighted another concern we have, is that we are seeing in policing, they go through the academy, they go on field training, they get out onto the street, and they really see what it's about, and they just walk in and say, this isn't for me. So, you know, there's some officers that'll do a couple of years, and they're, you know, whereas we didn't really see that as much years prior.
It's true. Other questions on the
Sure,
personnel?
if I may.
Jeff?
Chief, does this staffing issue have any effect on the accreditation you guys earned in the last year?
No, there's no specific standards that dictate what resources you have. There's more time and labor, yes.
Right.
Our crime analyst, she helps out with Lieutenant Carangelo, so that's more labor time.
Okay.
But there's no standard for that.
Thank you.
Charlie?
I noticed when the narrative says it's only the police officers who are sworn in. Is there any reason why the non-police officers can't be sworn to obey the law? In other words, you swear somebody in, all right, to obey the law.
So the term sworn kind of goes back to when you raise your hand and you take the oath. But really what it means more in that document is you cannot be a police officer unless you're certified by the police academy post.
Okay.
So there's,
Okay, got it.
you know, and you know, we also use our supernumerary officers. We're very fortunate that we have a handful of those that do help out with the Marine Patrol. They help out with the larger events. Unfortunately, we can't, only in significant emergencies or you know, weather issues, can we bring them into the patrol to help out. So we can't leverage them.
Okay, thank you, Chief. You know, why don't we move on to the capital side? And we may invite you back sooner, but now this is very informative, and thank you.
Yep, appreciate the attention, and I'll kick it over to the deputy now for the building.
Deputy.
Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. You have in your packets the PowerPoint presentation that was prepared, so I'll just quickly go through that just to update you on the building project. I know you've heard some of that content before, which is presented inside that packet, but what brought us into this project actually started in 2019. The town hired a firm called Hoffman Architects to do a slab moisture investigation. They produced a report in May of 2020 which found excessively high moisture transmission rates in the slab of the building, our lower level floor. In 2023, Downs Construction conducted a forensic investigation which determined that there was no vapor barrier placed underneath the slab at the time of construction. That was a recommendation that was done in the mid-90s to allow the slab to breathe, and that's it wouldn't have been done that way today. But basically what we ended up with was excessive moisture, humidity, slippery floors, failure of floor adhesion, mold, dirty ductwork in our lower level of the building. So the fix for that is negative side waterproofing. Basically what it means is to pull up all the flooring on our lower level, shot blast the whole floor down to concrete throughout the building, and apply the proper coatings that will contain the moisture. So in addition to the moisture, we have water intrusion in a couple areas, which during heavy rains we get some flooding into the building. Looking at those issues, we've identified, you know, equally of concern is our cell blocks. The cell blocks are out of date. I've been told they were original to the Harrison Avenue building, and some moved over to our building here on Laurel Street. But basically they're the old style bars which are now illegal in some states, basically susceptible to hanging, and we routinely have arrestees that will place clothing around the bars and try to hurt themselves. The cells lack adequate ventilation and fresh air return. They don't have fire suppression. Basically, we have too many cells. It takes up too large of a footprint on our lower level. There's 14 cells there. I think the thought was to prepare for holding more prisoners as, time went on, but the reality is that we hold less and, 5 cells would be adequate. The fixtures are also, they've reached their useful life and they're ready to be replaced, meaning all the toilets and sinks and whatnot inside the cell block. So the cells need work, need renovation. So additionally, our female officers, back in '95, we had 2 female officers. Today, we have 10. That represents 20% of the agency. They've outgrown the female locker room, so they're out of space there. So we need to renovate to give them more space. We can take from the cell blocks and increase the space that they need. On our lower level, we got to look in to see what the building needs, and we need some more space for patrols. They represent 60% of the agency, so more area for them to write reports. There's more and more writing involved in police work, so we constantly have officers in need of space to type, so we need some space there, some evidence processing needs, a physical training room needs. So in addition, looking at our building, we've realized we need a new roof. There's leaks throughout the roof in our building. I know that there was some money put aside years ago for a capital project there, which was kind of delayed as we looked at this renovation of the building. But our windows we've identified, they're in trouble. They're original to the building, 30 years old now. Some are failing, some are rotting, and the residential grade windows, so they're in need of replacement. Other major items in the building, our elevator, that's components are no longer serviceable. It was original to the building. And our generator is beyond its useful life at this point. It still functions, but clearly it's an important component in a public safety building. It needs to be operational at all time if we lose power. So we've had site work concerns. There's not adequate parking in the design at the front of the building, so we have that large hill. Causes a lot of members of the public to have to walk up the hill to get to the front of the building, so we need some more space up front for parking. Officer safety concerns, basically there's unrestricted access to our rear lot right now, which has been a problem over the years for several different reasons. So also looking at the deficiencies throughout the building, and our site work, our HVAC, we've had problems there. So the minor floor changes over the years to the building has affected the balance of the HVAC system, and we have uninsulated space above our ceiling tiles, which causes some imbalance there. So that was another design issue that probably was acceptable in the mid-90s, but today would not be acceptable. So it's something that we need to fix. So looking at all these problems, we've realized on our main level, now is the optimal time to confront some of the issues that we have on our main level as well, which our table organization has changed over the last 30 years. So we've taken on a police social worker. We now have IT staff working within our building. We have a crime analyst. Different offices have been built with walls over time, but we need to reallocate some of the space on our main level. Our dispatcher needs, we would like to add an additional console, moving from 3 consoles to 4, as you've heard from the fire department and the police department. Call volume is going up around town, and having an additional available space for another dispatcher would be a great thing right now. Our records has too much space on the main level, so records are becoming digital. Everything is, we're moving away from paper, so that's space that we can utilize there on our main level. There's a juvenile cell up there, which is no longer used. We had an emergency operations center, which is just one office now. It's one very large office, which that's additional square footage. So basically, on our main level, there's a chance to reallocate some of the space, which isn't a huge cost to the renovation, but now would be the ideal time to take on this project as one large, major bonded project as opposed to several smaller capital projects. So that was the vision for what we're doing with our building project. Basically, one time, this will affect patrol operations and affect our daily operations. So interrupting our daily operations just one time, being able to, we'll have to move our operations off-site, but being able to interrupt our operations one time, come in, give the town basically a solution that is a renovation to every piece of this building and fix every problem that we've been able to identify operationally and throughout the building. So at the end of this, what we hope is that, or what we know is that the town will basically have a new building at a substantially less cost of a new build, but they'll have a new building as the entire building would be renovated and, as one large project.
Thank you for that presentation. Where would you wouldn't be able to stay in the building in it wouldn't be occupied space during the construction, so where would you go?
So there'd be some phasing in the project. However, our patrol division would work here out of 45 North Main Street. In the back, there's Company 1, which is a volunteer, what was built for as a volunteer department in the back of this building here, which will suit our needs for our patrol division to work temporarily out of. It's a good location because there's already surveillance there, there's security there, there's key card access, and the IT connections are all there for us to be plug and play in terms of our systems. So our patrol division could work out of there in the back. Our administrative staff may come up to this room, which unfortunately some of the town meetings will have to go to the community house during the time of the renovation project, but administrative staff can work up here, and our detective bureau could bounce around through phasing of the project. Laurel Street would still be open to the public. We would leave a trailer there for public access, and we'd have an officer staff in case people from the public are going to go to the police department and have these, daily for records and to make complaints. So we'd have an officer there that'd be able to meet the public, take complaints at a trailer there or off-site, and dispatch officers as needed. But dispatch would also be dispatching from the police department as well because of the communications that are there on Laurel Street and the towers there. And in terms of the IT, they'd have to stay there for the project. So we'd have two sites essentially, but mainly the operations would be here. And again, like I said, the impact will be just like a one-time impact. It reduces the phasing of the project, which does reduce costs of the project by us getting off-site and allowing the construction company to come in and do the build-out quicker than they would be if we were on-site juggling personnel around.
Okay, thanks. Questions?
Time, how long?
15 to 18-month project.
Starting next,
It'd be great if we could start in the summertime, pending approvals.
Shirley.
just wondered.
Other questions? So, thank you for the presentation, not only on the personnel, but also on the construction demands, requirements. As we've had some very preliminary discussions with myself and the first selectman and Jim on not only these potential financing requests, but also whether or not it's the school, the ball fields. There's a lot of things in play here that we're going to be taking under consideration over the next several months. But this is very helpful, very informative, and we appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to item number 8, which is to consider and if an appropriate hear a capital projects transfer request from the finance director.
Joe. Last year, this time, you may recall, was the first year when we were implementing a recent ordinance that was approved, well, actually, it was back in '21, that related to capital balances. And you may recall there was a large number of projects that we consolidated, some we closed out. And as you can see on the second page of my letter, the list is vastly smaller than you've seen in the past, primarily because the first year was a major cleanup. And so these have been organized by committee. So you can see, so you have some energy saving projects, which are then basically moving to 24. Essentially, it's transferring and combining those projects. The only projects that are being closed on this sheet are there's some from the Board of Ed, some vehicles, small amount, $355, and the others are being extended. One of the things that can keep a project active is if there's activity in the projects, and so a number of projects that Catherine had looked at, and she actually was the one who spent all morning working and reviewing this, is because they had activity.
Okay, so see Jim's request here to, why don't I go over this briefly for the public, and he's arranged these by the RTM committees. First one for public services, moving $28,091 from, it's like an energy project, and moving those again forward into the similar initiatives for energy savings, as well as for parking lot improvements of $3,000 for a total of $28,000. For rules and ordinances, pushing forward generator restoration to a newer timeline for $33,462. Ways and Means, moving the Pisgah Brook Reserve funds of $3,500 into more generalized open parks and space improvements. And for the Education Committee, some system-wide roofing repairs of $3,052, and Blackstone Library furniture and fixtures of $13,000, moving both of those to more updated projects, one for Board of Ed for the same amount, $3,052, and moving the $13,535 into a Blackstone Library sinking fund. As Jim mentioned, closing out $335 of unexpended vehicle appropriations into to the general fund. So fairly minor transfer requests. We have questions from Jim on this? And they're not going to help any of the projects we talked about tonight, that's for sure.
No.
Not a lot. Harry, got any questions?
I'll move it.
Move it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Okay. A lot of good presentations tonight. Good warm-up for budget and other conversations and in future meetings. And with no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.